fact that I traded one uniform for another, and really that's what I did.
Welcome to Shop Talk with your hosts, Chief Jeff Walther and Sergeant Kevin Kwan.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 19th episode. Yes, Kevin and I can't believe 19th episode of Shop Talk with Chief Jeff Walther. I am he. We're excited. Yeah, we're excited. 19th episode. Great guest on, one of our own, Detective Tom Houk, who's a former professional baseball player. And we're excited to have him on because we're going to, as always, we want to connect spring training with, and this year with one of our folks who actually understands the game and played professionally. And I'm pretty excited about that. But hey, it's the end of February.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness.
Halfway.
From last month, those of our listeners who listened to our conversation, our podcast with Pat Williams, who ran the big show for the WM Phoenix Open. It was great having him on last month, and I am happy to say that Kevin and I are both still alive after the WM Phoenix Open, and all of the Super Bowl activities in Scottsdale. In fact, we had another record-setting year with the Open.
And it was an epic Super Bowl too to kind of cap the entire week for us. We saw great golf on Sunday for the finish with Scotty Scheffler winning, and then a fantastic game that led into Old Town and all the events that happened in Old Town. So it was really, really awesome. Very
busy for us. We wound up seeing about 1.275 million people.
Just an estimate.
1.275, just an estimate that came through the Open.
Yeah.
Interesting. You know, I just shared this in a East and West Valley Chiefs meeting today out in Glendale, that we thought we had about 400,000 people on Saturday, right? And then we got info from Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T.
Yeah.
That they had on that day at the Open Footprint Saturday, the big day, they had 480,000 individual cell phone hits throughout the day.
That's incredible.
We're like, okay, we were wrong in our estimate by a few tens of thousands of people.
Right.
So, which made the WM Phoenix Open on that Saturday the largest single day attended sporting event in the world.
Wow.
Behind, I always forget, it's the Daytona 500 or is it the Indianapolis 500? It's one of those.
Right.
NASCAR related that they get 350,000 people on site during that day. And we beat that.
By a lot.
Right. Crazy.
Yeah. And that's all from our partnerships that we can actually handle that and to have something so large.
It was a great day. Saturday was a great day. The every day of the week was great. The practice rounds on Monday, Tuesday, the Pro-Am on Wednesday, and then the tournament got started on Thursday, and the crowds just kept getting bigger and bigger. And so other than the quasi streaker who jumped into the lake on Saturday, now, I always tell people, like, well, how busy was it? What happened? I said, well, we had, on Saturday, we had about 155 calls for service internal to the location, 88 ejections, and 18 arrests. The big number I like to use is that on Saturday, because of all the Super Bowl-related events, that we were outside of the footprint of the Open, our patrol folks responded to 1,013 calls for service on that Saturday.
Really?
Yeah, 1,013. Our average call for service volume on an average day is between 500 and 650, and that's citizen-generated and officer-generated calls for service, but we hit over 1,000 on Saturday.
Wow.
For one day.
That's great.
So thankfully it's over.
Right.
Yeah.
The big thing that we noticed really this year was you talked about the crowds, and it was like a sea of people that were on specific missions. It wasn't people going off doing their own things. It was, hey, I want to go to look at this venue and how the WM is really built up this year. It was really cool to see just the wave and the influx of the people following their favorite golfers and paying attention to the parties and stuff like that. So it was really, really cool.
And I know I get grief when I say, oh, I'm glad it's over. Well, I'm glad that it's here in Scottsdale. I'm glad that Scottsdale is the epicenter for a lot of great, big, special events and great nightlife. I love the vibrancy of all that. But for our listeners out there, you have to understand the amount of time, effort, and energy that goes into the planning, into the preparation, and then everybody in the Scottsdale Police Department and our partners from around the valley, law enforcement agencies around the valley, are all working it. Our folks aren't on We block off. You can't take vacation days or take time off. Everybody's working.
Right.
On the weekends, I'm there and I'm in the EOC. Everybody's busy. Everybody's doing things. And so we're happy that it's here. We love it. It's very vibrant. It's a great event, but we're also exhausted and glad when it's over. And so another successful season. Kudos to everybody in the PD and our fire partners and city partners who did a lot of great work on this. And shout out to all of our local, federal, and state partners who really threw a lot of resources our way to help us out. So,
Right.
Chief's guest today comes to us from within our organization, from calculating the math of when to hit and catch the baseball in the big leagues to the math of the streets, where he's assisted with over 125 serious injury and fatal crashes, and has been the primary investigator on over 60 of those, with over 900 hours of vehicle crash-related education courses that include specialized training in pedestrian, bicycle, and motorcycle crashes. Please welcome Detective Tom Houk to Shop Talk.
So we're happy to have Detective Tom Houk from our VCRU, our Vehicular Crimes Reconstruction Unit. But Tom has been here a long time and is a former professional baseball player. And so I'm going to stop doing all the talking, and you need to stop doing all the talking as well. And we're going to let Tom introduce himself and kind of give us his background of kind of how he came to be a VCRU detective and that trip from professional baseball into a Scottsdale PD officer and then detective. Tom, welcome.
Thank you, Chief. Honored to be here, and thank you for the invite.
You bet.
So I'm Detective Tom Houk. I've been with the agency now in 2 days will be 23 years.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Started out as a patrol officer and spent 7 years, almost to the day that I was hired. Was fortunate and got transferred to the traffic section as a motorcycle officer. Did that for roughly 7 years.
Okay.
And then I had the opportunity to move back to the detective side of the traffic unit and did a lot of studying and going through classes and got over 1,000 hours of training. And
wow.
Ended up back there. And so I've been back there ever since.
You know, I don't think even in my career, early in my career, I understood all that went into reconstructing a collision, especially a fatal collision or serious injury collision,
Right.
and the amount of math, like
Yes.
trigonometry, and when you're talking about vehicle dynamics and the dynamics of a crash, and wow, can you just kind of give our listeners just an idea of all that goes into what you do as a VCRU detective? Because I would tell you that I think the vast majority of people, not just in the organization, right, even our officers and other detectives, but in the citizenry, have no idea.
Yeah.
The uber intelligent people, and the technology and the skills you bring to bear in reconstructing and investigating a fatal traffic collision.
Well, I can say that it's an ever-changing world. It's constantly being studied by various folks from all over the world. In fact, I'm getting ready to go down to the World Reconstruction Expo down in Florida. There's folks from all over the world that will be there attending that. They do mock crashes. The year I went 5 years ago when they had the last one, and they actually ran a semi tractor down a runway. Basically, it was out on an old Air Force base. Ran a tractor probably 40 miles per hour into a moving sedan and slammed it into the back of a tractor trailer.
Wow.
So that's the kind of studies that they do and work on just to show. And those aren't uncommon. We just recently had one on the I-10
Right.
where that happened, and where a semi ran into the back of a couple cars and pushed it into another tractor trailer, and there was a big fire down near Chandler Boulevard. So it's not uncommon to see those types of crashes. So it was interesting to see that live. Even though it was mock and it was, well trained and everything was safety, but to see that in the amount of force that goes into that crash was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So the 1,000 hours I've been through, I've taken everything from human factors to pedestrian crashes to bicycle crashes, two vehicles coming together at different angles. So there's a lot of input and training that goes into that, as well as the studies that we do on our own. And then when you throw in all the equipment that we have to put into that, just in the 9 years that I've been back there, we've gone through 3 different surveying equipment. So you got to learn all the technology and how to operate it. and then be able to use all the software and all that information. And then we were fortunate enough to get drones now. So I had to actually get my Part 107 license.
Your FAA license.
Yeah, which is the same license that a normal pilot would have to go through the written portion of it. Obviously, I'm not doing any airtime with a manned legs, but at the same time, it's a pretty intense class that you have to go through in order to pass that test.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because, and you mentioned the drone part. I think drones and lasers and all kinds of things that I think that people just don't have an idea or understanding of. And the question I get most often, or the emails that I get or phone calls I get in the chief's office, is why has the intersection been closed, or why has the roadway been closed for 4 or 5 hours?
Yes.
And you see that around the valley. And can you kind of speak to that? And again, I think that just leads us down the road of how in depth some of these investigations are and why it takes 4 or 5 hours to get the road opened again.
Right. Well, you're looking at a fatal crash or even a serious injury crash. You have human beings that are involved in these crashes. Yeah. And obviously we want to make sure that justice is served, right, wrong, or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's no different than any other type of homicide or a suicide or anything like that.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of time and precise information that we have to gather. And so when we get called out, sometimes we may be at home at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
So by the time we get there, a half hour to an hour has already gone by. And that doesn't include the 30 minutes of travel time from the crash to the hospital to check on injuries before we even get called out. So, there's an hour right there.
Yeah.
But once we arrive on scene, again, we're looking at all the dynamics that's going into this crash, and we got to make sure that we get all the precise information so that we're not missing anything. Because if you think about it, if it's your family member, you want to make sure that we do everything correctly.
Absolutely.
And then we got to make sure that we, once we get all that information, we got to document it accordingly. We got to use surveying equipment, make sure our measurements are correct, bring all that information back to the office. So a lot of that time, it is time consuming, and depending on the dynamics of the crash, it could be anywhere from 4 or 5, sometimes 6 hours, especially when you got multiple vehicles involved.
I always found it fascinating, the dynamics and the force that vehicles can do, even with each other and striking an object. I mean, we know that there's been vehicles that have flipped going as little as 15 miles an hour. And then you see the more incredible speed crashes that you see, and they're flipping 5-6 times in the air before they come to rest. And then it's your guys' job to piece all of that together with no video cameras, right? Like, that's the fascinating part, is you guys are able to do that based on what you find and your experiences. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, I just think it's you hit a nail on the head that I think is so important, Tom, and that is, I don't think people sometimes look at these collisions the same way as like a homicide, and that's what many of these are is that these are vehicular homicides, and you have to treat this is a crime scene. And just like any other crime scene, if somebody had been shot and killed or stabbed and killed, we're going to be out at that scene for a long time collecting and processing evidence. It's no different. This is just as important. This is just as high level of a crime in many instances as what people want to watch TV about, right? I call murdertainment. And so, but your discussion about we have to do right by the victims and their families. We have to provide a level of justice and a quality investigation that I think our citizenry demands from us. And you guys have always been the consummate professionals and experts in the field, and kind of that go-to people, I think, in the Valley. To be honest with you, we've always had that reputation of just being incredibly squared away in VCRU. And so I don't know, it's a tough job, but somebody's got to be a master of it, and that's you and everybody else in VCRU. And so thanks to you and the folks over there. But the question's going to be is, how'd you go from the baseball field, to getting involved in this? And can you kind of tell us about, your baseball career? I'm sure you started young, and how you got to play at the professional level.
Well, obviously baseball has always been my first love. Growing up as a small kid and leading all the way up through high school and even into college, baseball was my number one. I even had a kid in high school my senior year saying, "What are you going to do when baseball ends?" I said, "I have no idea." I said, at this point in time, I'm just focused on this year, and I'll figure that out as time goes. So I was very fortunate. I played high school ball back in Bloomington, Illinois, Bloomington High School, and Illinois State University was literally right next door. And I had an opportunity to take a scholarship with the Illinois State University Redbirds. My first year I get there and there's 8 shortstops.
Wow.
I was a shortstop. And so his mentality was that most of your shortstops were your better athletes in high school. And he figured he can convert you and move you over to another location.
Yeah.
So I quickly got moved over to third base, which was fine. But I wasn't playing every day. I was a freshman, and his thought was it'll break you down and build you back up by the time you're a junior or
It's
senior.
like the military.
Exactly. So one of the other freshmen, there was a pitcher, was from Springfield, Illinois, and he decided this wasn't for him, and he had an opportunity to go back to play junior college down at Lincoln Land Community College. And one of my seniors, when I was a sophomore, that was what he did. He went straight to the junior college down in Springfield, and he said, it's a good opportunity down there. The coaches squared away. In fact, the coaches down there played under the Illinois State coach. So he's like, I'm going down there. I've already got it set up, and the shortstop that's down there now is going to be moving on to a 4-year next year. So there's an opportunity for you to step right in and play.
Especially because you want to play every day, right?
Absolutely. That's where you get your experience.
Yeah.
You're not getting much experience sitting on the bench. And so I thought, why not? And it was probably going to be a little cheaper too, because my scholarship only paid for tuition because I was living at home. And so that was kind of an interesting, living at home and not really getting the true college life
experience.
And so I moved 60 miles south and played fortunate with the Lincoln Land Community College, and I was fortunate enough I got drafted at the end of that season.
Was that at the end of your junior season?
My sophomore year.
Sophomore year. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I basically played my freshman year at Illinois State. Only played a couple games here and there, and then I transferred to the junior college and played every day and did well and got drafted.
Wow.
So
good move then. Good choice.
I thought so.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate. The Minnesota Twins scout that was there, Ellsworth Brown, everybody called him Brownie. Everybody knew him as Brownie, and he'd been around the game for many, many years, older gentleman. And he saw enough that he saw me in high school, but then he kept with me and then actually drafted me in the 27th round back in 1989.
Wow.
So very fortunate. I got the phone call saying, hey, we drafted you. We'd like to come by and talk details. And so about a day or two went by, shows up at my parents' house, and
that's great.
We sat down, and here I am, 19 years old, scared to death, not knowing what I'm getting myself into. And
19 years old and multi-million-dollar signing bonus. Oh, wait a minute. That was 1989. No, that probably didn't happen.
Not in the 27th round.
Right, 27th round.
So
how many rounds are there?
Depends on depends on the year.
Okay.
And it depends on what the needs are as far as the organizations, because some will actually take more positions than others, depending on the needs.
So you get drafted. Where do you go? How does it go from there? I mean, you sign, right? You sign. Now you're actually gonna be making some money playing. For your the love of your life. You're getting paid to play baseball.
Right.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. Until you find out what I'm getting paid. So here I am, 19 years old. I signed my first contract. 2 days later, I get information that I'm going to be flying down to Sarasota, Florida. I'm reporting the next day.
Oh, wow.
They sent me my plane ticket and gave me a name and a phone number, and off I go.
Wow.
So I fly in. I use that phone number. I find a payphone because cell phones didn't
really 1989, right? Payphone.
Yeah. So I go to the airport. I make the phone call. Hey, I'm here. About an hour later, a trainer shows up, and then 2 other guys got on the little van with me, and we're off to a little efficiency hotel that they put us up in.
Wow.
So I spent 2 weeks.
It's a new adventure.
Yeah. So I spent 2 weeks in a little mini camp, myself and several others that were drafted, along with the guys that they put in what they call extended spring training, and I'll get to that here. We get together for a 2-week mini camp. They break us up into 2 teams. One team stayed there in Florida, and the other team went up to Tennessee, and we played in a short season.
Oh,
for about 2.5 months. So that was my first experience playing. So immediately I get there, and again, I'm drafted as a shortstop again. And the shortstop from Dominican Republic is hands down quicker, faster. And so I got moved to third base. So, yeah. So I made it through that season, went back to spring training, which was back in Fort Myers. They just opened up the brand new stadium down there. And so I worked out down there for the spring.
Yeah.
And I got stuck in extended spring training. I didn't make the A-ball club. And so here I am back down in Sarasota in the same league, which was fine.
Yeah.
We had every Sunday off. It was beautiful. We were right, pretty close to Siesta Key, one of the most beautiful beaches in Florida. And so it was fun. I had a good time.
Yeah, and you're 19. You're 19, and I know you're not making gobs of money, but you're 19 years old. You're down in Florida. You're playing baseball, and there's some money in your pocket. Maybe it's not a lot, but you're still getting paid.
Right.
That's so cool.
Throw a little tiny
cool.
ball and hit a little tiny thing. You're getting paid money to do that. That's so cool.
Well, I guess for me, I played baseball growing up too. I just wasn't anywhere near the caliber that you were. And so I just think about, man, that'd be, I don't know. Maybe it's every kid's fantasy who plays baseball to say, I'd love to, even at 19 years old, to make a little bit of money in your pocket, be playing in a beautiful area, and doing what you love. It's amazing. It's pretty cool.
So how's it work after you guys did that split squad, and then you came back down, and what was the process after that? Because the season, it's June-ish, right, is when you guys go. How long does the split season go for?
Basically the middle of June till the end of August.
Okay.
And so you hear people talk about September call-ups.
Yes.
Well, most of your minor leagues end at the end of August or beginning of September. And so the major league roster is usually 24 people, I believe, if they haven't expanded it yet. But you actually have what they call a 40-man that are protected. And so a lot of times they'll bring up in September, they'll expand the rosters to 30-ish. And so they'll bring some of those folks up that are on the 40-man roster and expand that roster in September. So that's the September call-ups, as they call it. Some of the folks come up from AA or AAA. For the playoff
concepts, yeah.
Exactly. And gives them an opportunity to see some of the younger folks for next year.
So where did you go from that point of the season ends, and now what's your next step?
So I go back home and find a job to get me through the winter and continue to work out. And then I go back to spring training and see what happens. So fortunately, down in Sarasota, I had actually a really good year that second year, which kind of was it's a memory that'll always stick with me. Last day of the season, they want to fly us all home immediately after the games. And so I was one of the first ones supposed to be leaving. So I get told the night before, your flight's early and you're not going to be able to play. Oh. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I pack up all my suitcases because I'm packed up for 2.5, 3 months. Yeah. So I've got a couple suitcases plus all my equipment. Get it all packed up. I show up to the park the next morning and I get called into the manager's office.
Oh, no.
I'm like, oh, what's going on now? That's usually never a good sign.
No.
So Joel Leppel, who was my manager at the time, he said, hey, we've got a problem. I said, well, what's the problem? He said, you have to play today. I said, what? He said, yeah, you have to play today. I said, Lep, I've got all my stuff packed up. Yeah. I'm ready to go home. And he said, yeah, but you're only 1 point away from winning the batting title.
Oh.
And I go,
no way.
I go, what? He said, yeah, the guy that's leading the league right now on average is only 1 point ahead of you.
Oh, wow.
And if he doesn't play today and you do, he says, I've already done the math. He said, if you get a hit in your first just one hit out of your first 2 at-bats, that's enough to put you ahead of him if he doesn't play. I'm like, Lep, really, I've got everything packed up. He says, go get dressed.
Wow.
Yes, sir. So I go in, I get dressed. We drive 45 minutes from Sarasota down to Port Charlotte, get off the bus, or we didn't even have buses. We had 15 passenger vans, 2 of them. That was what we traveled in. So I get off the van, we get stretched, we get ready, and he said, oh, by the way, you're leading off. I got to get you the quickest and bats as possible. I said, okay. So I get up, I get loosened up. We finally get ready to play. I step in the batter's box. First pitch fastball, I hit a line drive right at the shortstop.
Oh, no.
I'm like, ah. So we continue playing. I finally get back up. Now I'm coming up. There's 2 outs, men on second and third. And he throws me a 2-1 pitch fastball on the outer half of the plate. And I hit it off the center field wall.
Nice.
For a triple.
Yes.
Both runs score, put us ahead. He immediately calls into the dugout to come out and get me a runner to come run for me. I go running in, grab all my stuff, throw it in my little bag, jump into a van. The assistant coach drives me back to Sarasota.
Didn't even finish the game. Just got your hit and
Got my hit. That was it. Went back, got to Sarasota, jumped in the shower, packed up all my stuff. He ran me to the airport. I went through security, dumped all my bags, ran down to the gate, and they were just calling last call for my plane back to Illinois.
Oh, my gosh.
So, did you win the batting title?
He didn't play.
Yes.
So, yes, I won the batting title.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Louisville sent me a full-size bat on a plaque with all my information on it.
That's
and the
so
Gulf
cool.
Coast batting title. Yeah, it was really nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is that somewhere like you have it hanging in your house somewhere? Or is it, you're like,
Yeah,
now the 25 years later, like it's in the attic?
Ironically, my dad actually put it up in the house back at home. Unfortunately, both my parents have since passed, but my younger brother moved into the house.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you need to take this stuff with you. So, yeah, it's sitting at the house now.
That's awesome. I think that's a good segue into, can you kind of give us an explanation of how minor league ball, how the different levels in minor league ball, A and AA and AAA, and how you traverse that kind of that landscape of baseball and how you make it up to the major league? Can you kind of, because I followed baseball most of my whole life, and I don't know. I think it's just kind of get your take on how it all works.
So most of your organizations, at least back when I played, had 6 or 7 minor league teams. And then that didn't include even some of the countries, like the Dominican Republic and even Puerto Rico have actual teams down there as well that we actually take and draft every year. We draft players out of those, but they have actual teams down there. Each organization usually has 1 or 2 teams in those areas as well. But in my case, the Twins, just in the United States, had 6 different minor league teams.
Wow.
Ranging from AAA, AA, 2 single A clubs, usually high A and low A is what they called it, and then usually they had the 2 rookie ball clubs. So which is why when I first mentioned that I was in Florida and the other teams went to Tennessee was supposed to be a little higher level, usually most of your 4-year college guys and that kind of stuff, but it was still low A, actually rookie ball. So you basically play every year, and each year brings in, it doesn't matter what you do the year before, you still got to prove yourself. And when organizations make changes or opportunities open up, you move along and go through those steps. Now, that doesn't say you have to go from rookie ball and work your way every step of the way.
Right.
There's a lot of guys that are in AA that will actually get called up in September, have a good time up in the major leagues, and they're in that short period of time, and for whatever reason they'll make a trade here or there and they're in the major leagues just straight out of AA.
Wow.
So, but it is a long grinding career depending on where you're drafted, and all that takes place too. So a first rounder is going to get a better look than a 27th rounder, obviously. But it is an interesting world, very small. You're in your own little world. You don't really pay. You're playing every day and practicing every day, and you don't really care what's going on in politics in the world, the rest of the world. You're just kind of in your every day is a new day, and you just don't remember what day it is.
I know. I watched Bull Durham. I saw that. I think I have a good grasp on what's going on now.
Give me the ball.
Give me the ball.
It's funny you mentioned that. And obviously there's a lot of Hollywood in there, but there is a lot of truth to that too. The rundown buses and the long bus rides and 14, 15 hours sometimes sitting in the back of a bus and then having to get up and play the next day. And it's a grind.
So at some point you make a transition, right, from player to coach. Can you kind of lead us through that? Because that's super fascinating to me as well.
Well, let's back up. I worked my way through all the different leagues. I finally got to AA with the Twins. And ended up being in Nashville, Tennessee. The one and only year they had two teams in the same city. The Nashville Sound's always been in Nashville, and that's a AAA club. And that was the White Sox back then. And the Twins were supposed to be down, if I remember right, down in New Orleans. And there were some changes made, and then they decided they weren't going there, and then they didn't have a stadium for us for the Twins. So Nashville decided to take us in. So we were the Nashville Express. So I go to spring training, make the Double D club, went to Nashville, had a decent season. And I won't forget this. It was at the end of June, and we're supposed to make a 2-day trip down to Huntsville, Alabama. And I'm in the back. I get on the bus, got my little pillow, had a rough, we had a long night the night before, and so I was just trying to get some sleep before we had to play in Huntsville that night. And next thing you know, I said, Skip needs to see you off on outside the bus.
Oh, no.
I'm like, oh, here we go. Here it is. So I get off, and Phil Roof was our manager at the time, and he said, Tom, I got some good news and some bad news. I said, okay, which do I want first?
Right.
He's like, well, you're no longer a Twin. The good news is you're a Cincinnati Red. And I go, yeah, right. Let's get on the bus and let's get to Huntsville. And he says, no, Tom, I'm not joking. You've been traded. I said, really? And he hands me a little piece of scrap paper with a name and a phone number.
Oh, not
it's
again.
Just like the first.
I'm like, well, what is going on? And then he hands me my paycheck, which we're not supposed to get for 2 more days.
Oh,
And I'm
you're
like,
paid, you're
he's serious.
Wow.
And so everybody kind of gives me a hug. They hand me my equipment in a box fan box.
And now you're carrying it.
And I'm looking at these guys, and they all get on the bus, and the bus rolls away, and there I stand.
What?
With my little box fan full of my equipment, box fan box full of all my equipment.
It's like your girl left you at the altar.
I mean, really, it was an interesting moment. And so I looked down at this piece of paper that had the name Jim Bowden. I don't know who that is, and a phone number. So here I go trucking all the way back up to the front office, which is really the AAA office, because we were just visitors. And I said, is there a chance I could use a phone? And they're like, who are you? I said, well, I'm used to be playing with the Express, but I apparently have been traded to the Cincinnati Reds, and I need to call this name or this phone number. They're like, yeah, there's an office right back there. Help yourself. So I go back, I make the phone call, and I said, Cincinnati Reds, how can I help you? I said, I need to talk to Jim Bowden. Do you have an appointment?
Jeez.
I said, no, I was just handed this piece of paper and saying that I apparently have been traded, and I just needed to call him. Oh, one moment. Tom Houk, how you doing, sir? This is Jim Bowden, general manager of the Cincinnati Reds. And I'm like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So he said, yeah, welcome to the Cincinnati Reds. We appreciate you being with us. And how are things going? I go, well, I'm just a little shocked.
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting that in AA being traded.
Yeah.
And he's like, we're going to move you to the Chattanooga Lookouts. So in the same league that you're just playing in, the same team that I just got in a brawl with a week before.
No way.
So yeah, it was an interesting moment. So he said, well, it looks like they're going to be in Knoxville for a couple of days. So it looks like you're going to have a couple of days off to get organized. And I said, okay. He said, but let me give you another phone number. I need you to call Chief Bender. He's our player development director. And he'll give you some more information. And welcome to the Cincinnati Reds.
Wow.
So I go home to my apartment because my roommate and I shared an apartment. And of course, his wife was from Puerto Rico. She doesn't speak a word of English. I know enough Spanish to get myself in trouble. So I go back trying to explain to her what's going on. And then I call that number once I got back to the apartment. And he said, yeah, it looks like you're in Nashville. How quickly can you get to Knoxville? I said, I just got to get packed up here. It's about a 2.5 hour drive. He says, great. can you be there by 5? And it's already almost noon.
Oh, wow.
What?
I said, I'll do my best. So I pack up all my stuff, throw it in my little car, and here I am driving 2.5 hours over to Knoxville. I get in there just in time. The team's already out stretching. I walk in, put my bags down. One of the catchers is like, so where were you during the brawl?
With my fist in your face.
I was in the middle of the pile.
Yeah. Like, great. This is what I'm getting myself into. So we ended up having a doubleheader that night. I played the second game, had a couple good hits and a couple decent plays, and I'm now at Cincinnati Red organization with the AA Chattanooga Lookouts.
So you mentioned that being traded in AA or in the minor leagues doesn't happen very often, or it didn't happen very often back then. So is that why you're so surprised about the trade?
Yeah, normally your trades you're at the big league levels.
Yeah.
Once in a great while you'll get a minor league trade. I just happen to be the player to be named later.
I always see that. Yes, player to be named later. Yes.
So this was a good trade. They wanted you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, the manager actually did ask for me. The manager from the Lookouts, the Chattanooga team, he had seen enough, and at that time I was more of a utility player. I pretty much played every position on the field, and so liked what he saw, and they needed a shortstop, and they needed an infielder, and so he asked me to be the player to be named later. So,
which could be like months, right? After a trade happens,
it could be,
like so long in advance that.
Right.
Oh, we're going to do that guy now. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So how long were you there?
So I played the rest of the season. And that's where I actually met my lovely wife.
Oh, great.
At that time, to be. 5 days in, I meet her. She's in the front office.
5 days into the new team.
She's in the front office, and I meet her for the first time.
Wow.
And so a buddy of mine we were in there because he had to go in and pick up his paycheck. I'd just gotten mine from the Twins. And he said, let me introduce you to a couple people. And he introduces to my wife and said, yeah, this is Jolene. I said, I'm sorry, what's your name? I said, is this Joe? And she goes, it's Jolene.
Oh, he insulted her right away.
Right off the bat.
Done.
Yep. So we're not allowed to fraternize with the front office, and they're not allowed to fraternize with the players.
Sure.
So fast forward 2 months, we're at we have a day off, but they had a charity bowling tournament. And so I go to the bowling tournament, and they put us with 4 other fans, each of us players. And so she just happened to be right next to the lane I was bowling in, and my roommate at that time had just gotten released the night before. And he was one of the first ones that she had met when she started up there. And so she came over and asked me how he was doing and whatnot. And I said, he's doing okay. I said, when we get done here, if you want, I'll just take you by and you can, say goodbye or whatever. He and his wife. And she said, oh, that'd be great. And then we ended up going to dinner. After we went there, I said, are you hungry?
I'm
went to dinner. We secretly dated for a month and a half.
Oh, that's great.
Till the season ended. And then she moved to the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga as a director of ticketing and marketing for the sports. So I didn't have to hide anymore.
Yeah. That is such a cool story.
It is.
You don't know you're going to get traded. It's like, hey, you're on the bus. Here's your check and your slip. Call this number. And 5 days later, after you meet her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
That's great. So you play how long there?
So I finished that season. And then I went back to spring training. I made the club. I get all the way back to Chattanooga because they put me back in AA again. And I get off the bus, and they said they made a trade, and I'm being released. And the Reds call me back. They said somebody got injured, and would you be willing to come back and play? I'm like, absolutely, yeah. So I went back and played another season. That was the season that Michael Jordan was playing with. With the Barons. With the White Sox.
Mm-hmm.
So I played the rest of that season. Went back to spring training then with the Twins, and they invited me back for spring training, and I ended up getting released. So then I went up and played in the Northern League, which is an independent league up in Duluth, Minnesota. St. Paul Saints, and those are all up in that area. And while I was there, one of the owners of the independent club was also a scout for the San Diego Padres. And he came to me one day. He said, "Hey, I met with the director of player development with the Milwaukee Brewers, and he's talking about possibly having player coaches. And I immediately thought of you with all your experience and everything. You'd be perfect for that. What do you think about that?" And I go, "Oh, that sounds like a great opportunity."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, he wants to meet with you at the end of the season. Would you be able to meet with him at some point?" And I go, "Absolutely. I can drive back to Milwaukee on my way back to Illinois." And he's like, "Done. I'll set it up." And so, sure enough, I went on my way back to Illinois, met with Fred Stanley, who was the director of player development. And he said, "Unfortunately, we think that player coaches is actually a conflict of interest. You're going to be making decisions with the guys that you're actually playing with." And
you may bet on baseball. I mean, we had that debacle that happened in the 80s.
Hey, wait a minute. You can bet on baseball now.
So he says, "If you're willing to retire, I may have a job for you." And I go, "May?" And he says, "Well, I won't know till the rest of the season is, shakes out." And
How old are you at this time?
26.
Okay.
And so about 3 months later, I get a phone call. "Hey, we'd like for you to come to spring training and come to extended spring training and then go into coaching the young kids after the draft,
Wow.
either in Helena, Montana or Ogden, Utah. We have 2 teams in the same league." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, it's an interesting concept, but it works." I said, "Okay." So I signed a contract, and
Wow.
so the next year I was in. That's how I ended up out here. So my wife and I got married the next month after I met with him initially in Milwaukee. We got married in September, and so here we go. We pack everything up and we moved to. We come to spring training because she was still in baseball. She would move down to Mobile, Alabama, and was working on an independent team down there.
Okay.
And 2 weeks before I'm supposed to report to spring training, that team folded. It's like, oh, what do we do?
Yeah.
So we packed up all of our stuff from our little apartment that we had, threw it in storage, took one of my cars over to her cousin's house, and we drove the other car out here.
So did you wind up going to Helena or to Ogden?
The first year I was in Ogden.
Okay.
So I was the infield and hitting coach.
Okay.
And so I came out for spring training and what they call extended spring training. So you have about 25 guys that don't make a roster at A-ball, but they're still good enough they're still young enough to develop. And so they keep them down in what they call extended spring training. And so I'm basically here coaching those young kids. And all the other organizations do the same thing. So we basically play like a mini league. It just doesn't count.
Yeah.
And so we develop them and then we have the June draft. We bring them in for the 2-week mini camp, and we split them up into 2 teams, and one team is in Ogden.
Full cycle now.
Yeah, exactly. So
how long did you do that?
So I coached the first 2 years in Ogden.
Okay.
And then at the end of the second year, they came to me and said, "Hey, we want you to manage the Helena Club next year."
Wow.
And I said, "Really?"
Really? Like the big boss?
Yeah. I'm like, "Okay, that sounds great. I'm game."
Wow.
So I go we go to spring training, and now I'm managing one of the clubs, and so I'm through going through extended. What was perfect about that is I was here till June every year, so I was only gone for 2.5 months. It worked out great for my wife and I. But now here I am, the manager. They gave me a brand new rookie outfield coach, a brand new rookie pitching coach, and a brand new trainer.
Jeez. With a brand new manager.
Yeah.
And a brand new manager. Here we go. So it actually worked out. We didn't play as well as we'd hoped, but we played hard and had a great time and had a few injuries that set us back. And so at the end of the season, they asked me, "Do you want to keep managing, or do you want to go back as the infield and hitting coach?" And I really loved Ogden.
Yeah.
I said, "You know what? I'm going to go back and coach," because the other manager at that time was Eddie Cedar, who'd been the third base coach for the last several years with Milwaukee now. He was the manager for that club, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to go work with him."
Yeah.
So we had a great time, enjoyed that 4th year, and then unfortunately they made some changes. Bud Selig became the commissioner of baseball.
Yeah.
he was actually the owner of the Brewers. They had to get rid of him.
Right.
He had to give up his rights to the team, so he gave it to his, I believe his daughter, and she made some changes in the front office and got rid of the field manager. And Sal Bando was a general manager at the time, and that didn't go over well. She basically overstepped his job, and so he ended up resigning. They brought in a new GM, and then the domino effect happened.
You're right.
So my contract didn't get renewed. So here I am. My wife and I just bought a house.
Oh no.
So had you bought a house in Ogden, or had you come here already?
We already were still here.
So let me back up then. How did you because you got the offer to go to either Missoula or Ogden. How did you find your way to the Valley?
So we came here in '96 for spring training.
Okay.
And then she was able to get a good job, and we just made this our home base.
Yeah.
I was only up there for 2.5 months. So and then she would come up halfway through the season to kind of break up the season. So it worked out really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, we ended up, this was home base. So we finally bought a house thinking, my career is going to continue, and she's got a good job, and now I don't have a contract.
Oh my God.
So what do? I go find out that the Mesa School District's hiring bus drivers. So they were hiring, and they were teaching you how to drive a bus. So that's what I did for the first month.
Yeah.
And then, here's your application, slides over that application to me. I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is getting real now. And so that's what I filled it out, went through the testing process, went through the oral boards, passed all that.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is getting interesting. So I saw that city of Scottsdale was actually hiring. And so I went through the whole same process. And
was this about 2000?
Right at 2000, February 2000. And so, I fast forward, Scottsdale put me through the process, and then I get a phone call. Hey, as long as you pass the physical and with the doctor and the psychological exam, we want to hire you. And I'm next thing, February, I'm in the academy.
Wow. That quick.
It was that quick.
You were just about to be with Tempe, and we snagged and got you. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the more depressing podcasts that I've done, because I realized how just pathetically normal my life has been. And Tom has so many, it's such a cool story to how you got here. I mean, the crazy baseball journey. I mean, the notes off the bus that you've been traded.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Find your wife 5 days later, and who's going to be your wife 5 days after you're traded, and managing baseball. And what a cool story, Tom. That's fantastic. And so I always try to connect what we do here with a particular story. And so your story, I think, just what we do in the police department, and kind of that community service. But you've got to see in your 23-year career here, my assumption is, like most of us in Scottsdale PD, you've worked spring training games as an officer for the at the Giants. Yeah. And how do you, I mean, when you're working those games, and all the different capacities, probably different assignments you've worked at the games, you look at that, it's got to be quite different than how I look at it. Yes,
it is. And it's funny you say that. Ken Strohmeyer and I and Mark Johnson, a few years back, we went down to Tucson to get some extended training on some of the equipment that we have. They just Tucson was hosting a little conference down there, and brought in the folks from the equipment that we were using. And so we went down there to get some extended training. And so it just happened to be during the playoffs. And so we went to dinner, and we were sitting there and watching the playoffs. And so I'm making comments, here's a 2-1. He's going to throw him a fastball right here. And sure enough, it was. And so Ken kind of looks over at Mark and says, this kind of brings a whole new light to the game, doesn't it?
Because when we look at the ball, you're like, it's a spinning ball. Or you're like, no, it's a fastball. It still looks like a spinning ball to me.
Yeah.
It's just such a, and we've been fortunate, I think. And maybe it's that there's and you can speak to this, there just seems to be a correlation, to a team sport like baseball, and then getting into the police department, which is very much a team sport, right? And that camaraderie. Do you see those similarities yourself?
Oh, absolutely. It's a different camaraderie, but it is that same thing. I always joke about the fact that I traded one uniform for another.
Yeah.
And really, that's what I did. you're still family. I spend more time with my guys in the office than I do with my own family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially this time of the year when I'm working 12, 14-hour days, standing at the open and at Barrett Jackson and whatnot. My wife and I are two ships passing in the wind, and so you develop a real tight knit group, especially when when you're in a specialty unit. You become a secondary family.
I don't know, I just had so many thoughts, about that, because we have a number of people come to mind. Before we started recording, we talked about Commander Matt Evans and his time with the. I think he got drafted by the Detroit Tigers, right? And I think of other people. One of our bike officers, Don Beshwani, or Darren Hyman. I think of people like Rob Katzroff, right. Or somebody on the umpire side. I think Darren's gone to the umpire side, but former retired Sergeant Mike Snader, who was. And I'm sure there are many others, but it seems like we've really gotten kind of our share of former professional baseball players or umpires that said, policing there's a similar component of that uniform camaraderie, right. Team heading toward the same goal. But man, super cool.
Hey, it's funny you mentioned Mike Snader. He was actually an umpire in the Midwest League when I was playing there.
That's awesome.
So we talked quite a bit, about that. And I remember him just very well because we actually took a bus from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We played a game in Kenosha, and then that same day we jumped on a bus. Well, he and his partner Andy, who actually made it to the major leagues as an umpire, they rode with our bus all the way up to Minnesota. We spent the night after the Twins game. We went down and played against the team that we were playing in Kenosha. They traveled too. And we played a game in the Metrodome, and Andy and Mike Snader were the umpires.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So cool.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, just and then fast forward a
small
whole
world.
a whole bunch of years later, you find yourself both as police officers for the city of Scottsdale.
Yeah.
That's madness.
That's a wrap talking baseball and collisions with Detective Houk. We hope this helps you drive safer today. Remember, don't text and drive, but keep those eyes on the road. Now let's jump into today's 4 Reels questions.
This is our good time where we
good
get to
questions
know
for us.
we get to know you and just fun, silly answers. So we call this our 4 Reels section.
Yeah, he's always got some, what superhero do you want to be, so, and he never shares these with me beforehand, so I'm just as clueless as you are about it.
Yep, you don't have those on your thing. So kind of whatever pops into your head, it's just kind of to find out just a little bit more about you for fun. This is kind of more philosophical.
Oh, great. Here we go.
I hit these
Tom's
questions
gonna have to answer this one.
What do you feel has been your greatest win so far in life?
My greatest win.
That's good for you. Connect that to like baseball and good for you. Okay.
I even quoted win.
Yeah. I would definitely say my best friend and spouse, my lovely wife. Definitely my biggest win.
Good for you.
100%. 100% same that's that one decision. I mean, hers, not mine. Her deciding, that I was worthy enough to be with her. Everything else in my life has, everything in my life positive has sprung from that moment. I was stupid, and we met when we were 14 years old in high school, Horizon High School here in the Valley, North Phoenix, 56 in Greenway, go Huskies. Everything in my life positive has sprung from that moment. That's my biggest win, far and away.
Would you rather be perceived as being kind, smart, or attractive?
Kind.
There's a lot of 7 deadly sin concepts in there, right?
Yeah, I'd have to go with kind as well.
Yeah. Smart, that's okay. Did you say was the other one attractive? You notice I didn't even go with that one because that's not that attractive in me is not something that I've ever connected in my life. So I never had it. Never don't need it.
It's a perception. It's fine. All right. Which book or movie impacted you the most growing up?
Book-wise, I'd have to say The Outsiders.
Oh, great,
yeah,
great book
Yeah.
and movie.
It was a good movie.
Movie, Red Dawn, the original with Patrick Swayze, rest in peace. C. Thomas Howell. Yeah. Charlie Sheen. Yeah. Powers Booth. Yeah. Red Dawn. It's probably why my wife and I consider ourselves to be
Preppers.
into emergency preparedness, because you never know when the Russians are going to invade.
Do you think cats have any regrets for their actions?
0.
Absolutely not.
None. No.
Because they're always trying to kill you.
They're always in boss mode.
All right. What movie sequel, because I love movies, what movie sequel would you erase from history?
Yeah. Red Dawn Part 2. Are you kidding me? That was awful. You don't take Red Dawn, a cinematic gem, and redo it with Thor and the North Koreans, and no, absolutely not. Red Dawn this whatever remake,
Yeah.
gone, erased forever.
See, I'd have to say Caddyshack too.
Another good one.
Caddyshack was a classic.
Yes,
you don't
mess with a classic.
No.
We saw 2 before we saw 1.
Ooh.
So I didn't even know that 1 existed when we saw 2. Because I was, an infant when 1 came out. All
I will
right.
tell you, just on the same theme, because it's recent, best sequel, Maverick.
Ooh, I would have to.
Here's why.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, we joke around about this, is that she and I saw Top Gun.
Mm-hmm.
We were 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
And we saw it in the theater. And then fast forward 36 years later, we saw Top Gun 2 Maverick in the theater together with the same lead actor, and he killed it. I mean, he was
and looks
amazing
exactly
in
the
it.
same.
Yeah. So, weird, right? 36 years apart. But
Wow.
anyway.
So what's your best sequel ever?
Best sequel.
It's tough because they seem to always do a sequel for every movie now.
Major League 2.
I started
to like Major League 7 or something.
I grew up with Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the first movies that I got to see as a young child. My wonderful cousin took me. She was probably 16 or 17 at the time, maybe 18. I'm trying to remember when it came out.
Yeah.
1977, the first one came
Oh,
out.
you're going to get Kevin to
There you
start
go.
geeking out right
So,
now. This is going to get
So
him
yeah,
back.
I was 8, and so yeah, I was a big Star Wars guy.
When the Empire came out in 1980, I wasn't alive yet, but growing,
I was 10 in 1980.
I was 0.
11.
I was minus numbers. One of the biggest things growing up is being such a uber Star Wars geek with it is I didn't appreciate Empire Strikes Back until I became older and understood the actual complexities behind that storyline, which was fascinating for me.
Tom, I can't thank you enough for being here. It was this was terrific. I learned a lot. You started in 2000 here, right? And I started in 1994. So our paths have crossed, throughout the years over the last 23 years. But just in the last hour or so, I got to know more about you in that time than any time before. And what a real treat for me, and I know for Kevin too, to kind of go walk with you down memory lane and connect that to spring training here in Scottsdale and all of your experience. I can't thank you enough for being here. It's really been a treat.
No, it's been a pleasure for me as well. I've enjoyed actually going down memory lane, so it's been great.
Terrific. To all our listeners out there, and to Kevin. Thanks, Kevin. Good job. Usually I'm all over you about Star Wars and all kinds of things like that, but good questions. Good questions. To all our listeners out there, thanks for listening to us another month. We have a really good time doing the show and connecting with our community and talking about the Scottsdale Police Department and all the different community connections that we have. We're going to be bringing on some more of our employees as we traverse the calendar year 2023. Can't believe it's almost March already.
Yep.
And just take care of each other. I know I get a little preachy at the end of these, but a lot of craziness in the world right now. A lot of division, a lot of craziness, and so we're seeing an uptick in violence in our city. With Tom here in particular, we're seeing a lot of collisions, a lot of high-speed collisions, a lot of people racing and doing some crazy things on our roadways. Just be mindful of one another, take care of one another, and remember that every day offers each of us the opportunity to be more in the service of others. So take care of one another, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you for listening to Shop Talk episode 19. Enjoy the nice cool weather, spring training, and leave a comment on one of our social media platforms at ScottsdalePD and tell us who your favorite baseball team is. Until next time, remember to be more.